On today's episode, we're talking about one of the hardest transitions in an agency, scaling business development beyond the founder. Most founders hit a ceiling not because demand isn't there, but because they try to replace themselves all at once. They hire a salesperson, expect magic, and it doesn't work. We're going to break down why that fails, how to deconstruct BD into its core functions, and how to rebuild it piece by piece so it actually scales.
All right, Siwuk. So this is a topic that we've dealt with in many situations, whether it's across our own Barrel Holdings portfolio or in talks with agency founders who are looking to sell their business. And one of the things that we find is that this founder bottleneck, is really structural. I think what founders kind of don't appreciate is that, it's not about them just being good at sales. They're actually running 5 or 6 jobs all at once. They're juggling all these jobs at once under the label of business development. So, these are things like relationship building, brand credibility. They're kind of the outbound work that they sometimes do, the sales conversations they're having, and as well as like the account growth that they're handling as well. And so, I think it's all, in some respects, it's just scotch tape, that's holding it all together. And, the founders being super scrappy with all of it. But, at the same time, it is a lot for one person to handle. So I think, first of all, that is the structural challenge.
Yeah. And I think, what we see typically happen, right, is a founder will hire a really, head of sales or some kind of BD lead to take over what they feel like they're doing. And they expect, immediate pipeline, immediate closing of deals, and then the growth of the agency. But, what actually happens in reality is, the pipeline may not be as strong as they expect. The close rate may not be as high as what they were doing. And what happens, the founder will, get disappointed. They'll get pulled back into the process. And then that new person that they brought on will just churn because, they're not getting the results that they expected.
Yeah, I mean, if we could have a nickel for every time if an agency founder says, I tried hiring a salesperson and it didn't work out, we have many nickels, right? And I think the problem isn't necessarily higher. It's kind of the old adage that we, say sometimes, you fail to set up and, they're set up to fail, right? And so I think the challenge here is really thinking through like what is business development in an agency, and what can you do to, in many ways, de-hat, break down, and modularize the different components of business development so that it is more manageable for people you bring in to help you, and also to avoid doing which founders fall into trap all the time of mapping their own capacity to somebody else. And if someone isn't a mini me that can do everything that the founder can, it's an auto fail. Just getting away from that mindset.
Yeah. And just a quick call out. We had a couple episodes in the past. So episode 16, we talk about scaling your agency beyond $2 million. Talks about this whole idea of a hero complex where a founder, feels like they need to do everything. And then also episode 9, even further back, how to design your org chart for growth. We talked about, founders really needing to focus on what is their in a zone of genius and what they're really good at, and bringing in people to complement them versus, just trying to clone themselves and do more.
Yeah. So let's actually dive into the 5, business development functions and this whole process. And how do we de-hat the founder? If we're going to do that, we actually need to know what business development consists of. So let's dive in.
Okay. So the first is marketing and awareness. And this could manifest through multiple different channels, but things like content posted on LinkedIn, could be newsletters, could be webinars, conferences, going through like the award cycle or getting PR for the agency. And this is really to build up that top of the funnel awareness for the company. So where this falls into the journey, when a prospect thinks about, having a need, does your agency come up as a top of mind? And, will they eventually reach out to you to work with you? So I think that these are activities that the founder, obviously has done quite a bit, through the journey of growth. And some of this may need to stay with the founder, but that is one of the main functions.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times too, the founder might do this in flurries and spurts, right? They might, when they have some time, they do a lot of the marketing, and then they get busy
Yep.
and they forget to do marketing for a while, and so it becomes this kind of inconsistent activity. And
Yep.
so that, but it's definitely a necessary one. You got to continue to market in a proactive manner. And then yeah, just the second function is partnerships. And we talked about this in episode 12, where we discussed kind of putting together a lightweight partnership program that can actually work for agency. Uh, but really, what is partnerships? It's about cultivating referral relationships with other agencies. It's about having relationships with consultants, tech platforms, and we talked about this in our ecosystem episode, where who else is in the ecosystem that you could develop relationships with, and it's just having this disciplined motion of identifying the partners that are of quality, continuing to have this kind of mutual referral relationship of give and take, and so building upon that. And a lot of times, a lot of agency founders do this instinctively, and they might kind of hang out with some of these people and have good relationships. But like, I think just that sometimes you lack the discipline. Sometimes the follow ups aren't as tight, and so this is another area where the function of partnerships is such an opportunity for agencies.
So the next function is outbound. So outbound as in proactive prospecting, and that can take the form of cold email, going through LinkedIn, if it makes sense, direct mail for an agency. And this is different than marketing in the sense that it is really about having it's a volume game and having the discipline to kind of go through, do list building, iterate on the messages, and just keep going. And it's that repetition that needs to happen over a long period of time, where you may not see the results immediately.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about what are some opportunities there. And then the other part is just this whole idea of like closing and sales, and really this is about the full sales process. So once an opportunity comes in, through maybe your website contact form or through an intro referral, it's about the discovery calls. Framing the problem, scoping. Working with your team to make sure you guys are presenting the best kind of solution. Negotiating on the contract side, and then finally getting that signature and that first payment out. And really, like, this is where the founder is probably going to be very reluctant to give this up as easily, but also spend a lot of time on this very function. And there's a reason why it's so important that the founder is involved in this, because a lot of this is about building trust with the prospect. It's about making the right impression. It's about saying the right things at the right time. And so founder, with all the reps and experience and obviously the stakes, are going to perform at a really high level. And so it's that much harder to delegate or trust someone else with it, and expect similar kind of results. And so yeah, this is definitely something that needs to be looked at more closely in terms of like, what are the different subcomponents within this function.
Yeah. All right. So the last function here is account growth and expansion. So this is really on your existing accounts. How do you do kind of upsells, cross sells? And we had a previous episode around thinking about expansion paths for accounts, and really ultimately deepening that client relationships. So founders, often kind of do this through just the relationships that they've had through the full business development cycle, and kind of staying in touch and building that relationship with the clients. And this is an area that we see, a lot of agencies underinvest in, or kind of, not having a really good system around it.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so those five. So let's just recap it real quick. So marketing, partnerships, outbound, sales process, and then the account growth slash expansion. And so this is like business development. And so the founder is doing all five of these. It's probably not an even 20% split. It's probably, in some, stages, maybe account growth gets a lot of it. Some stages, like the sales process dominates it all. And maybe when times are slow, the marketing piece dominates more of it. But it's still five things that they're juggling. And so, yeah, this is an opportunity to bring in people who can go, 100% deep into one area. And I think that's where the real opportunity is. And like I said, it might not even be one person. You might be building a team for each of these functions. And that's the real opportunity for scaling beyond the founder.
Yeah, sounds good. So let's kind of talk about like the sequencing. Like, what should a founder do first, second, and how do they kind of build this capacity over time? This is not easy, right? We've gone through this, and we know, like, this could take like months, if not years, to really transfer the kind of the trust and goodwill that you've built over time. And also, it's not something that you can just like hire someone and be like, all right, you got this, you got marketing, I'm going to step back. You really have to, you know, train, try to transfer as much knowledge as possible, model behaviors, and then over time, that person or those people could, gain the experience that you as a founder had. So it's very much a hands-on activity.
Yeah, and just I want to call out, like, I think our podcast, we don't offer shortcuts ever, and I think like this is another case of, hey, nothing is easy, and everything requires kind of that patience, the consistent work, and just true to the name of agency habits. Like, you need to develop these good habits for these things to compound and actually come to fruition. So with that, let's dig into like the sequencing. The first thing we would do. What would you take this the first one?
Yeah. I'll say the first thing, you may be doing it already, but we'll call it account growth. So I would say this is probably I'll call it the easiest to delegate, but it's not easy. But you probably have people in the client relationships already. So day to day project managers, you may have people who are kind of account managers. And really, it's about formalizing that function and designing the path for that expansion of that account after an initial engagement. So for this account managers, account directors, people in these roles, think about, can you incentivize them to grow accounts? Is there some kind of variable comp component that, affects the behavior of growing accounts beyond the initial engagement? And really, this is, it's high leverage because you've already won the account and you're just trying to grow the relationship that you've built already. So the hard part of getting them through the door is done, and now it's seizing on the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think part of it is the founder can't just delegate completely to the team. I know there definitely needs to be a discussion on hey, the founder needs to check in and be like, hey, these are some of the directions that I'm going to take the company in terms of service expansion and all those things. And then there's also the aspect of for key accounts where let's say the founder's relationship with the client is really deep. They're still gonna have to play a role and check in and maybe be there for the quarterly business reviews, the annual reviews, or whatever. And so I think this thing, it's not something you can just set and forget. It's still an important piece, even with all the infrastructure built out.
Yeah, and we've gone deep in a couple past episodes. 21, we talked about going from projects to growing accounts. So talking about the whole account management layer. And then episode 31, talking about, what you actually sell versus what you think you sell. And talked a lot about the idea of the expansion path.
Yeah. Okay. So the second one is partnerships. And, as we mentioned, we have the previous episode about the lightweight founder-led motion. But, I think if you want to evolve beyond maybe a couple check-ins a week and you want a fully dedicated practice, bringing in somebody from the partnership side, it can be very valuable. I mean, we've seen this happen across, a few of our Barrel Holdings agencies. So, for example, at Barrel, we brought on a partnership manager who used to work at Shopify, has relationships with folks there, and it's been great just having somebody with familiarity across the ecosystem, really kind of taking the reins from the CEO Lucas and being able to continue to grow those relationships and check in with them, explore co-marketing opportunities, bring back knowledge from those partners and sharing it with a team that could be used in client conversations. So there's so much room to just really grow that partnerships motion. And as we kind of talked about, if you kind of understand the ecosystem we play in, there's just so many different layers you can hit in terms of that partnership program.
Yeah, awesome. So the next is marketing. So marketing. So this could take the form of like a marketing coordinator or somebody on the team to run the content calendar, thinking about how you're posting on different channels consistently, if you have a newsletter, how is that being coordinated, managed internally, keeping the website updated, if there are case studies or new services to be presenting on the site, having a person really own that function, because, a founder probably, dabbles and, whenever they have the time to think about these channels, they might kind of focus and post and, get the content going. But having someone really own that, yeah, develops that consistency. For a lot of these activities, it needs to happen on an ongoing basis, and it's, if someone can own that, getting the ideas and the content from various people on the team, that will happen, a lot more consistently.
Yeah, I mean, and there's like small things to add to this too. Like it's like, hey, can someone own the creation of case studies on a quarterly basis? And so, every
Hmm.
quarter somebody is checking in with the team and coordinating to get a case study written, some assets created, and now all of a sudden you have fresh case studies in your sales and marketing materials. You have it on your website. You could do a post on it, and it's really rich, and it's something that now becomes an asset that helps you do better in other aspects of business development, like your sales process.
Yeah, and there's a lot. There's time-consuming things where, like, if you want to host an event, there's a lot of coordination needed there. If you want to do even a webinar, like attending a conference and trying to get the most out of that experience, like all the work that goes into developing that may be put on the back burner because of how time consuming it is. But then after that, you attend these things, you host these things. Like, what happens after? Having someone own the follow up, the marketing, the promotion of all the activities that happen there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the fourth one in the sequence. So we talked about, all right. So first one we said was account growth, partnerships, marketing execution, and then okay, fourth one is outbound. And uh, I mean, this one we know too well. Like founders love to just be like, all right, let's pipeline is weak, or we're not getting enough leads, or I need some help on BD. Let's get outbound going. Let's hire an outbound shop and see what we can do. And you know, part of the problem, and we're not anti-outbound. There's instances where outbound can really work. Is that outbound oftentimes happens too early, and this is before the agency has a clear positioning, proof points, an offer. Like the messaging is all kind of generic and doesn't really work. And so, how do you build that infrastructure first before you do the outbound? And this is why like this comes kind of towards the bottom. And really, once you get the marketing and the partnerships, motion going and generating some positive signals, and the reputation flywheel is going for the agency, then cold outreach can really be that kind of supplemental thing to bring new folks into that kind of engine of marketing, partnerships, and so it just works better in tandem. To just do it in a vacuum, it's almost like setting it up to fail. But once you get some of these other things going, outbound can work better. And with outbound, like with anything else, you can build a very sophisticated internal team. With some kind of RevOps person, maybe a GTM engineer. Get really fancy with something like Clay or whatever, and do all kinds of interesting things. Or you could hire an SDR specialist agency to do your bidding. But what matters here is you just can't do it on its own and expect miracles.
Awesome. Okay, so the last part of the process here is closing. And yeah, closing is one of the things where, depending on what you're selling, it could stay with the founder the longest. So it's thinking about, because throughout the process, from the initial connection through the actual close, there are many different touch points where the founder could be offering their expertise, their experience, and they're really layering on stories and anecdotes that kind of help that process of close. And when you end up stepping back from that, oftentimes it's either a senior person that has been with the organization for a while, that kind of knows all that context, or someone who understands your market deeply, and can verbalize and explain your expertise. I think that that's why it can be hard to step away from that role. And not to say that the founder needs to step away 100%. There are many steps of the sales process where maybe the initial screening calls, with prospects through the whole journey could be handled by other people, and then maybe the founder comes in at the end, and they might have strategic conversations in the process. So I think really that's where you're kind of thinking about how you can um, bring on other people on your team to help on that closing process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like with we talked about this in the earlier section. Like there are subcomponents to this, and you can go really deep because I mean, you could argue like the qualification itself could be a role, right? Where you just have somebody tasked with managing any kind of referral inbound, and then going deep on the discovery call, gathering all the requirements on that call, doing the research on the prospect, and then making that determination of, all right, cool, this is qualified. Now we can activate the team. And then there's a whole scoping process where it could be the same person. You could bring a solutions expert maybe to come in, a solutions engineer or like a solutions consultant or whatever, to then really scope it out or coordinate with, subject matter experts across the agency to scope something out. You might even bring in at a certain point a account manager or project manager who might be on the project to kind of, create the preliminary timelines and other things that might go into like a proposal. You might have a full-on team that's working on the proposal as well. And then, of course, presenting that at the end, does it have to be the founder? Maybe it could be someone else, a leader on the team that could also do that, or it could be the person that's kind of leading the sales process end to end. So there's so many combinations of this that could manifest. There's no right or wrong. It's more about capabilities and who you trust to kind of lead the process. And I think once you kind of build that muscle and that those reps, you might be in a situation where for 80% of the opportunities that come in, you can have somebody, you could trust somebody fully to run the process end to end, and with the team and bring in the necessary people. And then maybe for some of the high stakes type of accounts, maybe it's some brand that you're like, wow, we really want to go bring the full on team on this, where the founder can be more involved. So like this can show up in so many different ways. It's just all about mapping and knowing what goes into the process. And I think this just like with anything, whether it's your engagements or just any aspect of your agency, just take a step back and be like, all right, like what are the different workflows, what are the processes, and then who can play what role right now, or what is it right now, and then where are their leverage points that can free the founder up to do the thing that's most important, most valuable, most kind of their zone of genius, in their zone of genius. Like once you do that, it just unlocks so much more of it just kind of gets rid of that bottleneck we talked about.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this earlier, but if you think about the function of the sales process, like it doesn't have to be one person. Like in this case, many people are involved in it, so it could be many different stakeholders that can take it from start to end.
Exactly. So one word of warning, and I think we talked about sequencing these 5, and of course, remember this is all kind of wrapped up, multiple hats on the founder. But I think there's a temptation by the founder to be like, I got 5 hats on. Maybe I'll give 2 or 3 hats to someone else. And this kind of bundling of some of these roles, I think, is a dangerous kind of temptation that should be avoided. So, for example, you might find a really good partnerships person, but then you go, hey, partnerships process is getting going. Why don't you also help me with sales? Or hey, I brought you in for marketing, but looks like you have a little bit of time. Can you help me with some of this outbound stuff as well? It starts to mix their kind of objectives, and you might think just relative to yourself as the founder, you go, oh, it's only 2 things instead of 5, but it's still distracting. It kind of muddies the waters. And just from our experience, it's better to be disciplined about giving people the lanes to succeed in. Obviously, everyone's mileage might vary, but this is just a word of warning for folks.
Cool. So let's kind of bring it all together. We've outlined kind of the 5 different functions and the sequence that we would go through to kind of de-hat the founder.
Actually, can I just like illustrate this real quick, right?
Yeah.
It's basically the single point of failure, for example, is like a brilliant founder, agency founder, like amazing insights, like client loves them. And they're like, look, like I'm awesome at growing accounts. I got this like vision to do. And so they're like, they they paint this amazing roadmap for the client. They're all bought in, and then it's like there's no. And then the founder gets busy with some other stuff, so then there's nobody to kind of follow with, like, let's say the proposal, talking to clients through the details, putting the plan together, all that. Like, so imagine like not having any of that set up. Like, it doesn't matter how brilliant they are.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
now it's become literally a bottleneck and a point of failure.
Yeah, and we've seen that bottleneck. Like let's say something kind of blows up on the operations side, one of the accounts that are in flight. You just don't have time to work on that proposal or whatever it is. So it just stalls in that process. So yeah, truly a bottleneck in that whole BD process. Cool. Yeah, like another outcome, pipeline becoming more predictable. If each input, if each channel has their own focus, they can have goals, right? From this, with Outbound, I want to have these goals, and leads are coming in from this direction. For account growth, you have goals, you have partnership goals, marketing goals, etc. And there's focus for each one. Hopefully, it'll lead to a little bit more predictability with how leads are coming in. And then, yeah, along those lines, because there's people who own each of these functions, or multiple people, there's a depth that you can go down. That founder, when you're juggling all these different areas, like you just don't have the time to focus. A lot of times, it's like, yeah, it would be great if we can do those webinars or go to those events or host those things or be on those panels. It's just like you don't have time, you have limited capacity. But if different people are owning those different areas, you can actually execute on a lot of those initiatives.
Yeah, and I think for a few of our agencies, it's a beautiful thing to see when they start to have this kind of business development team, and they're able to work together, divide and conquer, and kind of really do these activations that normally would have been just impossible for just a single leader to shoulder.
Yeah. So yeah, ultimately, it's really about thinking about what is the highest leverage activity for a founder in this process. It doesn't mean completely removing themselves from that BD process, but what are those high leverage strategic deals that need the founder support to close? Maybe it is for thought leadership, stepping back and thinking about things at a high level and creating the content that gets visibility. And then if there are other relationships, like it doesn't have to be all of the relationships. It could be a few key partnerships or key relationships that do drive a lot of opportunities for the agency. Really just thinking about what are the few things that drive the largest outcomes.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I think this is goes back to being a mindset thing where it's really hard to let go of the things that kind of was working, right? You're like, oh, stuff is getting done. We're doing some marketing. Newsletters are going out. I'm posting on LinkedIn every now and then, and so it feels kind of like, well, like should I really be spending extra dollars investing in these things? But once again, it's all about that leverage, and just it's the upside of having people truly dedicated and focused, and being really good at some of these things that no founder can do with just being spread thin across all these functions. Okay, so we covered a lot today. So let's just wrap it up. I mean, I think just going back to our original message at the top of the pod, just stop trying to hire one person to replace yourself. Just if anything you take away, like just get rid of that fantasy. Just think about the 5 BD functions. Make sure you sequence it properly, and instead of going wide and trying to juggle everything, think about the depth and the opportunities that presents. And really, the founder, the highest leverage thing isn't to do all the BD, but it's to build that machine, be that architect of that system. So yeah, with that, thanks for joining us. Till next time. Thanks.